No one wanted this aggressive dog. Then a cop and his veteran father sat beside him. Snow drifted across Northwood Valley in thick white sheets, swallowing the pine ridges and softening the sharp edges of the Oregon winter. The sky hung low, heavy with another storm rolling in. Ethan Cole steered the patrol SUV through the slush, one hand on the wheel, the other steadying the folded wheelchair beside him. He was 31, tall, with a calm that came from years of holding things together long after they had already fallen apart. His breath fogged faintly inside the collar of his sheriff's jacket. The empty seat beside him reminded him of too much. In the back, Walter Cole sat quietly, the weight of 67 years and too many battles resting in the slump of his shoulders. A Gulf War veteran, once sharp as steel, now hollowed by grief and time. His wife of 42 years had died that autumn, leaving a silence no radio, no visitor, no well-meaning neighbor could fill. His eyes stayed fixed on the window, unfocused, as if watching ghosts move across the snow. Ethan cleared his throat. "Thought you might like the drive. Shelter's got new rescues from Highway Patrol." Walter didn't look up. "I don't need another dog, son. I need your mother back." Ethan said nothing. Some wounds didn't allow answers. He turned into the gravel lot of Northwood County Shelter. The wooden sign, its blue paint chipped by decades of storms, creaked in the wind. Ethan parked and stepped into the cold, unfolding the wheelchair and helping his father settle in. Walter's hands trembled only slightly, but Ethan felt it like a punch. "Let's make it quick," Walter muttered. Inside, the warmth hit them first, then the smell of disinfectant and wet fur. Rows of kennels stretched down the hallway, each filled with barking, pacing, pleading. The shelter lights flickered against metallic bars like reflections on a frozen lake. From a side door, Dr. Lila Grant emerged, pushing a mop bucket. She was 34, auburn-haired, wearing a fleece vest over her scrubs. For all the exhaustion in her face, her smile carried real warmth. "You two came out in this weather?" she said. "Brave or bored?" Ethan managed a faint grin. "Maybe both. Dad's getting some fresh air?" Lila nodded toward Walter with a gentle respect. "We've got plenty of four-legged therapists here. I don't need—" Walter began, but she only smiled. Sometimes the broken ones find each other. They moved down the hall. Dogs barked, some playfully, some desperate. Ethan paused here and there, offering a hand or a soft word. Walter kept his gaze forward, jaw tight, refusing to see the hopeful faces watching him roll past. At the last kennel, Lila slowed. Her tone shifted. This one's different. Inside, a German shepherd stood braced like a coiled spring. Thick sable fur matted along his spine, scars cutting across one ear. A bold red tag hung on the bars. Aggressive "do not approach." The moment the dog saw them, he lunged, slamming into the metal with a sound that echoed through the entire corridor. His growl was low, primal, the kind that made muscles tense before the brain caught up. Walter flinched. Hell, why would anyone keep an animal like that? Lila sighed. Highway Ranger found him half-starved near Bear Pine Ridge, nearly chewed through the trap they'd caught him in. No chip, no ID. Out of everyone here, he trusts no one. But Ethan had gone still. Not from fear, from recognition. He took one step closer. The dog bared his teeth, pressing so hard against the bars they shook. But then, mid-snarl, his body froze, his tail lowered, his breath hitched. The shepherd backed up a single uncertain step. Lila blinked. Well, that's new. Ethan's chest tightened. His voice dropped to a whisper he had not used in 2 years. Rain. Walter looked at him sharply. You know that beast? Ethan swallowed hard. The world tilted for a moment, falling back into a canyon of flame and smoke. I had a partner. K9 Rain. They said he died in the explosion. His body was never recovered. The shepherd's ears twitched. He gave a low sound, not a growl, but something wounded, almost human. Lila stepped forward. Ethan, that's impossible. This dog showed up months ago. No records, no one reported a missing K9. Ethan knelt beside the bars, ignoring the warning sign and the warning in Lila's voice. His fingers touched the cold steel. Rain. It's me. The dog stepped forward, slow, tense, tail hovering between fear and hope. His nose brushed the bars. A soft whimper broke from his chest. Then another. His eyes, amber and storm-colored, locked onto Ethan like a memory long buried, clawing its way free. No one in the hallway spoke. Walter stared, unable to hide the shock in his face. You're telling me this is the same dog? The one from that wreck? Ethan nodded once. That wreck killed Officer Travis Hale. Rain disappeared. They ruled him dead. But I always felt something was off. Lila's expression shifted from surprise to concern. Ethan, if this is Rain, he's been through hell. Severe trauma. Weeks, maybe months being held somewhere. That level of fear doesn't come from the wild. Then who did this to him? Ethan asked. The shepherd flinched at the tone, pressing his head against the bars, pleading without knowing how. Walter exhaled, the sound rough, like gravel. Looks like you weren't the only one who crawled out of fire, son. Lila hesitated, then unlocked the kennel door halfway. I shouldn't let anyone close to him. But I don't think he'll hurt you. The moment the door creaked open, Rain stiffened, muscles quivering. Not from aggression, from old instincts fighting new fear. Ethan held still, letting the dog come to him. Rain leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Ethan's hand. Something in the room shifted. Something felt like a beginning. Walter looked away quickly, wiping the corner of his eye with a gloved hand. Damn, animal's going to make me sentimental. Lila studied Rain carefully. Ethan, if he recognizes you after all he's survived, the question is not how he lived. It's why he disappeared. Ethan's jaw tightened. And who wanted him gone? Outside, the winter wind howled through the valley like a warning. Inside the shelter, a resurrected K9 trembled beneath Ethan's hand, and for the first time in 2 years, the frozen truth began to crack open. Snow kept falling long after sunset, smoothing the rooftops of Northwood Valley into soft white domes. The coal house sat at the edge of the pines, warm light glowing behind frosted windows. Inside, Ethan moved slowly through the living room, watching Rain sniff every corner as if mapping the space for danger. Walter sat in his wheelchair near the fireplace, hands folded tight, studying the dog with the same wary caution he used on unfamiliar soldiers decades ago. Rain circled once, twice, ears swiveling. His ribs showed faintly under his fur. His tail hovered low, unsure. Ethan knelt to unclip the temporary shelter collar. You're home now, buddy. Rain stiffened, then let the collar fall. His eyes flicked to Walter. For a long beat, neither moved. Walter gave a dry breath. Your dog has opinions. Ethan almost smiled. He always has. They fed Rain in slow, careful steps. The shepherd didn't eat like a house pet. He ate like something that had starved long enough to learn not to trust seconds. Ethan sat with him on the floor, letting Rain check his hands, his clothes, even the faint scars near his wrist from their old training days. Every touch pulled a memory loose. Every memory brought back the echo of a canyon full of smoke. By the time the clock hit 9, the wind had picked up. The valley's annual Winter Welcome Festival had started in town, and with it came distant fireworks. The first crack echoed through the hills like a gunshot. Rain's body snapped upright. Another boom, louder this time. Rain froze, pupils blown wide. Then he lunged under the table, claws scraping hardwood as he tried to wedge himself into a space too small for him. His breath fractured into sharp, high-pitched gasps. Drool trembled at the edge of his lips. His tail clamped under his body. Ethan rushed forward. "Rain, hey, it's all right." The shepherd didn't hear him. Not really. He stared through Ethan, through the room, through the present. His entire frame shook like something in him was breaking loose. Walter's voice cut through the panic with a weight that made Ethan turn. That's battlefield fear. Ethan swallowed, sliding onto the floor beside the trembling dog. Walter wheeled closer, the crackle from the fireplace becoming almost too loud. "I've seen that in men who came back from Kafji," Walter said quietly. They were home, but the war followed. Another fireworks boom rattled the windows. Rain flinched so violently his head hit the underside of the table. Ethan reached out slowly, palm open. Rain hesitated, trembling harder, then nudged his head against Ethan's hand, trying to anchor himself to something real. Ethan wrapped an arm around the shepherd, pulling him into his chest. Rain pressed his forehead into Ethan's shoulder, desperate for something to drown out the echoes in his mind. "It's okay," Ethan whispered. "You're safe. You're safe, Rain. I've got you." The words were the same ones he had said the night of the explosion, the night he thought he lost him. Walter watched them for a long moment before lowering his gaze. The same hollow look passed across his own face, like a shadow crawling through old wounds. Another firework lit up the window, casting the room in a hard flash of red. For a second, the flare reflected in Rain's eyes, and something inside Ethan snapped open. A memory burst through, sharp and absolute. The canyon, the overturned cruiser, Travis Hale shouting for help. Fuel leaking across gravel. Sparks, Rain pulling at his leash, barking, trying to drag Ethan out of the smoke. Then the explosion. The world went white. They told Ethan the blast was instant. No one could have survived. But Rain had. Another firework snapped him back. Rain shuddered violently, whining into Ethan's shirt. Ethan rubbed the dog's neck, grounding him. Walter spoke again, voice low. "That dog has seen more than either of us want to imagine." A strange silence fell, broken only by the popping of logs in the fireplace. The festival sounds faded as the wind shifted. Rain's trembling eased into a low, rhythmic shiver. He stayed pressed against Ethan's chest long after the sky outside returned to quiet. When Rain finally lifted his head, he glanced at Walter. But this time, the look changed. It wasn't fear, it wasn't confusion, it was recognition. Slow, measured, Rain got up and walked to Walter's wheelchair. The shepherd stopped, inches from Walter's boots. His posture lowered, his ears relaxed. He let his nose brush Walter's knee. Walter's breath caught. "Well now, aren't you full of surprises?" Rain stepped closer, resting his head against Walter's leg. Not the way he leaned on Ethan for protection. This was something different. A shared understanding. A wounded soldier finding another who carried the same weight. Ethan watched, stunned. In training, Rain had always gravitated towards the most fragile, the most guarded, the most broken. He could sense it. He could read it. And right now he was reading Walter like an open book. Walter cleared his throat, trying to hide the emotion rising in it. Guess he knows a veteran when he sees one. But there was something else in Rain's eyes. Something alert, searching. As if he wasn't just recognizing a wounded man, as if he was recognizing a role, a purpose, a mission. Rain turned back to Ethan suddenly, ears perked toward the back door, his tail lifted slightly, uncertain but curious. He padded toward the window, staring into the dark woods. Ethan stepped closer. "What is it, boy?" Rain didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stared, focused, tense, like the woods held a scent he remembered but couldn't place. Walter frowned. He smells something. Something familiar. Ethan felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Rain had survived 2 years missing. Something or someone must have held him through that time. And now, on his first night home, he was sensing something in the woods behind their house. Something that made his instincts rise like a waking storm. Ethan rested a hand on the shepherd's back. Whatever you're remembering, we'll face it together. Rain didn't move, didn't blink. He just watched the tree line, as if waiting for something to step out, as if he expected it to. Morning in Northwood Valley arrived slow, wrapped in pale mist drifting through the pines. Ethan woke to the muted crackling of the fireplace and the soft thud of paws moving across the hallway. Rain was already up, already alert. The shepherd moved with a steadiness that wasn't quite calm, but wasn't panic either. It was the walk of someone who had learned to survive by always checking the room first. Walter was already awake too, sitting in his wheelchair near the family bookshelf. His robe hung loosely around his thin shoulders. A framed photograph sat in his lap. Rain hovered beside him, not touching, just watching. Ethan approached quietly. Morning. Walter didn't answer. His thumb traced the edge of the frame. Ethan recognized the picture immediately. His mother, Margaret Cole, smiling in front of the old fishing dock. Rain's nose inched closer, breathing deep as if cataloguing a scent he shouldn't have known. Ethan frowned. You didn't know her, boy. But Rain stayed there, unmoving, staring at the photo for a long, unbroken moment. His jaw tightened in a way that looked almost thoughtful. When Walter finally set the picture back on the table, Rain sat beside him, leaning just slightly into his leg. Walter exhaled heavily. He does this every morning. Finds the picture, watches it. Ethan knelt. That's not random. Dogs don't sit with grief unless they smell it, or recognize it. Walter gave a dry, humorless chuckle. Well, he found plenty here. Rain lifted his head at the sound of a distant engine. Not a car, not a truck, a motorcycle. The rumble rolled through the valley like a vibration against the ribs. Rain shot to his feet. The shepherd's tail stiffened, his head dropped low, his ears pinned back as if preparing for impact. He moved toward the window with a stalking precision Ethan hadn't seen since their active duty days. Outside, a motorcycle wound around the forest road, gears shifting sharply. Rain let out a deep, warning growl. Not a fearful sound, a territorial one. Ethan watched, unsettled. He never reacted like this before. Walter's eyes narrowed. That's a soldier's reaction. That's a man hearing the same engine that chased him into hell. Ethan stepped closer, to the window. The motorcycle kept moving, disappearing around the bend. Rain stayed rigid, eyes locked on where the sound had vanished. What happened to you out there? Ethan whispered. Rain didn't move. He just kept staring. Later that afternoon, Ethan prepped the garage for winter. The last of the snow shovels hung on the wall. A smell of old lumber and cold metal filled the air. Walter rolled in to check on him, but Rain wouldn't cross the doorway. The moment his paw touched the threshold, he recoiled as though the concrete had burned him. Ethan paused. What's wrong, boy? Rain whined sharply and backed up. His nose twitched. His hackles rose. Ethan glanced around the garage, confused. The space was ordinary. But then he noticed it. A spilled can of motor oil from the week before, pooling under the workbench. The moment Ethan stepped near it, Rain barked. Not aggressive. Warning. Ethan straightened. It's just oil. Rain barked again, harder. Walter gripped the wheels of his chair, eyes narrowing. Ethan, smell it. Ethan crouched beside the puddle and inhaled. Sharp, acrid, sour enough to sting the sinuses. He knew that smell. He had smelled it before, 2 years ago, in the canyon, right before the explosion. A chill spread down Ethan's spine. That scent was burned into his memory, the scent that had clung to his uniform, his hair, his hands after he dragged Travis Hale's body out of the cruiser. The scent of sabotage. Someone had tampered with the fuel line that night. Investigators had dismissed it as collateral damage. But Rain was reacting like he remembered more than that. Ethan stood slowly. His voice was tight. This isn't just fear. This is recognition. Rain edged closer, sniffing the air, then growled at the spilled oil as if it carried a ghost. Walter swallowed, his face pale. Dogs don't react to things that don't matter. If he's scared of that, then whatever happened to him was connected to it. Ethan's mind raced. Someone in Northwood Valley owned a motorcycle. Someone who used this same brand of harsh synthetic oil. Someone who had been near that canyon. Someone who might have wanted the K9 unit gone. He felt the old instinct return. Investigation. Suspicion. The sharp tightening in his chest when a detail didn't add up. Rain stepped beside him. Not behind him. Beside him. Standing firm with a steady posture Ethan hadn't seen since their service days. Not fear now. Focus, like a dog reporting for duty. Then a sudden noise outside snapped every gaze to the back porch. A clang. Metal hitting wood. Rain lunged toward the sound, barking fiercely, tail high and stiff. Ethan grabbed his coat. Stay behind me. Walter wheeled himself toward the hallway. Don't go alone. Rain was already at the door, paws braced, waiting. Ethan opened it carefully. The cold air slapped him. The porch was empty, the snow untouched. But something was wrong. Something subtle. Something off. Near the back gate, almost hidden, under fresh snow, a single boot print faced the house. Not his. Not Walter's. The snow around it was melted slightly, as if the person had been standing there for a long time, watching. Ethan crouched, brushing away the top layer of snow. The print was deep, heavy, the boot tread unfamiliar. Rain approached slowly, nose low. He sniffed the print, then recoiled violently, snarling. His ears flattened, his body coiled like a spring, ready to attack something that was no longer there. Ethan felt the cold settle deeper in his bones. Someone had been here. Someone who triggered the exact trauma Rain carried from the canyon. Someone who used the same oil. Someone with a motorcycle. Someone who knew Rain was alive. For the first time in 2 years, Ethan let the thought form fully. The explosion wasn't an accident, and whoever caused it had just come back. The next morning carried the muted stillness of a valley holding its breath. Frost clung to the fence posts. The sky stretched pale and cold, the sort of winter day where sound seemed to travel farther than it should. Ethan loaded Rain into the back of the SUV, while Walter settled into the passenger seat, wrapped in his heavy coat. Rain didn't resist the ride, but he didn't relax either. His eyes scanned the tree line, muscles tight, as if he expected the motorcycle to roar out of the woods at any moment. They reached the Northwood Veterinary Clinic just after it opened. The bell over the door chimed softly, and Dr. Lila Grant stepped out from the back, flipping through a clipboard. "Morning," she said, then noticed Rain. "He looks better today. Still wired, but better. He hasn't stopped checking the windows since last night." Ethan replied, "Something's following him. Or he thinks it is." Lila motioned them into the exam room. "Let's get him checked fully so we know what we're up against." Rain moved in slowly, nose sweeping the floor first, then the air. He hesitated beside the metal table. Ethan lifted him gently, and Rain didn't protest, just stayed still, eyes fixed on the door as though guarding the exit. Lila's hands were steady as she began. She checked Rain's ribs, spine, paws, and old scars with care. After several minutes, she stepped back, brows knitting. This isn't just a stray who wandered too long. See this? She lifted Rain's fur along the neck. The skin underneath was rubbed raw in a circular pattern. He was chained for a long time. Ethan's jaw tightened. Months? Probably. The hair loss is from friction. And here. She pointed to 2 small indentations on the side of Rain's neck. Thin, evenly spaced. Metal burns, consistent with a shock collar. Walter looked away sharply. Don't tell me someone tortured him. Lila didn't soften the truth. That's exactly what happened, and not recently. This was done before he was found, maybe far before. Rain kept still, but when Lila touched the small circular burn marks, his breath changed. Not a growl, not fear, something colder, a memory he couldn't shake. He looked at Ethan, eyes flicking with something like apology, as if he should have been stronger. Hey, buddy, Ethan whispered. None of that was your fault. Lila moved to his hind leg. See this scar? That's from wire, not nature. Someone tried to restrain him with whatever they had. Ethan swallowed hard. Who would restrain a trained canine? Walter answered softly. Someone who wanted to break him. Lila glanced between them. I'd bet my license he didn't escape the canyon accident on his own. Someone took him. Someone held him. Someone used him like property. Rain's ears twitched. He pressed his head into Ethan's hand as if grounding himself, but his eyes had gone distant again, drifting back to some place neither of them could reach. Walter watched the dog closely. That's the same look the boys had after Kafji, like they weren't sure which world they were in. Ethan turned. Dad, you never talked much about that. Walter leaned back slightly, the old weight returning to his face. Because you don't describe nightmares to someone who doesn't have them. But your dog here, he's seen the dark. I recognize that stare. It's what happens when you survive something you're not supposed to. Rain lifted his head at Walter's tone, ears forward, sensing the shift. When I came home, Walter continued, my mind was a minefield. A backfiring truck, a slammed door, someone dropping a tool. Any of it could turn my blood cold. I looked normal, but inside, I was still in the desert. He nodded at Rain. And he's still in whatever hell someone put him in. Ethan swallowed, the truth clicking into place with a slow, heavy dread. All the signs, all the reactions. Rain wasn't just traumatized, he was trained, modified, controlled, and he had escaped. Lila ran a small scanner over Rain's neck. No chip, no tag. If he was officially listed dead after the accident, someone may have wiped him. But get this. She pointed to the side of his neck. These faint marks? They weren't made in the last 2 years. This was ongoing. Repeated. Ethan's pulse sharpened. Someone held him after the accident. Someone trained him with a shock collar. Someone used him for something. Walter looked at his son. Whoever took him didn't want him found. Lila stepped back from the table. Look, Ethan, whatever happened to Rain wasn't random. He didn't just run into the woods and live off the land. Someone kept him alive. Someone restrained him. Someone dumped him only when they couldn't use him anymore. Ethan nodded slowly. Or when he got away. The room fell silent. Rain shifted on the table, eyes focused on the door again, reading the hallway like an open threat. Ethan exhaled. I need to go through the accident records again. Lila frowned. Didn't the department close that case? Yeah, too fast, too clean. And something always bothered me. I just couldn't see what. Walter's voice was low. Because you were grieving. You weren't looking for the cracks. Ethan stepped to the wall panel, pulling out his phone. I'll access the archived report when we get home. An hour later, back in the house, Ethan opened his laptop at the dining table. Rain lay beside him, head resting on his paws, but eyes tracking every move in the room. Walter rolled in, sitting across from him. Ethan navigated through multiple layers of Sheriff's Department archives. He pulled up the Canyon crash file. The same summary he remembered. Vehicle collision. Fuel ignition. Explosion. K9 presumed dead. Case closed. But Ethan kept digging. He opened the raw data logs, the GPS timestamps, the patrol communication files. That's when he saw it. A chunk of data was missing, a gap in the GPS trail, a full minute cut out. The map line jumped from point A to point C with no explanation. Someone had edited the file, someone with access. Walter watched him tense. What is it? The data's been tampered with. Ethan opened the communication logs. Same thing. A block of audio was deleted. Only static remained. Rain lifted his head suddenly, ears alert. Ethan stared at the screen, pulse quickening. Dad, someone erased part of the accident record. Walter frowned. Why would they do that? Ethan leaned back, the truth forming like a slow, rising storm. Because something happened in that missing minute. Something they didn't want anyone to see. Maybe they wanted the explosion to look accidental. Walter's eyes widened. You're saying someone made that crash happen on purpose? Rain stood abruptly, moving to the window. His posture sharpened. A low rumble built in his chest. Ethan's breath caught. Rain knows something too. Outside, the wind pushed snow from the roof in a soft sheet. But it wasn't the snow that held Rain's focus. It was the woods, the same spot where the boot print had been. Rain barked once, loud and sharp, the sound slicing through the quiet. Ethan closed the laptop. Whoever erased that data, they aren't done yet. Walter wheeled closer to the window, staring out into the forest. And they know he's alive. The next few days brought a strange calm to Northwood Valley. A calm that felt fragile, like the thin ice forming across the creek behind the Cole house. Rain had begun sleeping beside Walter's bed, the shepherd's breaths slow and steady through the long nights. Sometimes Walter woke from his dreams with a jolt, but Rain would lift his head immediately, pressing it against Walter's knee until the tremor passed. It was the first sign that the dog was reclaiming pieces of himself. On Thursday morning, Ethan stepped out to gather firewood, while Walter stayed inside writing. The wind carried the distant sound of children walking home early from the valley's winter half-day. As Ethan stacked wood beside the porch, he heard a faint shuffle at the end of the driveway. Mason Harper, the 11-year-old boy from next door, limped slowly past the gate. His left leg dragged slightly from a birth injury. He always kept his backpack tight against his chest, eyes low, shoulders tense. Other kids called him Pine Walker because of his slow pace. Ethan hated that nickname. Rain noticed the boy first. The shepherd stood on the porch, tail low, ears held forward in curiosity. Mason froze when he saw him. Everyone in town knew Rain was the aggressive rescue dog Officer Cole had brought home. Parents whispered warnings, kids kept their distance. Mason clutched his backpack harder. Is he okay? Rain stepped down one stair. Slowly, no growl, no teeth, just watching. Ethan moved toward them cautiously. He's all right. He won't hurt you. Mason nodded, but didn't seem convinced. His breath fogged in the cold. Then the sound of spinning tires shattered the moment. A group of older boys on dirt bikes turned the corner, skidding across the icy road. They laughed loudly, revving their engines in reckless bursts. Ethan recognized them instantly. Jace Kendall and his crew, always pushing limits. A thick spray of slush flew straight toward Mason. He lifted his arms to shield himself, losing balance. And Rain moved. No hesitation, no fear, no conflict between instinct and memory. The shepherd lunged forward and positioned his body between Mason and the oncoming mess, absorbing the entire blast of slush across his side. The bikes roared past, engines snarling. Mason stumbled backward, eyes wide. Rain stood planted like a stone wall, head lowered, tail stiff but calm. He checked Mason once, twice, sniffing his boots as if confirming he was safe. Ethan reached them in seconds. "Mason, you all right?" The boy breathed hard. He protected me." The boys on bikes circled back, slowing when they saw Ethan's uniform jacket and Rain's stance. Jace raised both hands defensively. "Hey, nobody got hurt." "You're lucky nobody did." Ethan snapped. "Cut through the ridge trail, not the neighborhood. Last warning." Jace muttered something under his breath but turned his bike around. The others followed. Engines faded into the trees. Mason looked down at Rain again. The dog lifted his head and gave a short, soft huff. An invitation. "Can I pet him?" Ethan nodded. "If he lets you, yeah." Mason reached out, hand trembling slightly. Rain leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently into the boy's palm. Mason's face lit up with something Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Walter watched from the window, his hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair. When they came back inside, he wiped his eyes quickly. That dog's worth more than people give him credit for. Later that night, news spread fast. A few neighbors had seen the moment. By sundown, Rain wasn't the aggressive dog anymore. He was the dog who protected Mason Harper, a boy who had never been defended by anyone. It was the first shift in the valley's perception. Quiet, but powerful. After dinner, Ethan sat in the living room reviewing photos from the canyon crash. He'd requested the original investigative files from archives. A few grainy shots showed the charred patrol cruiser, smoke curling up the canyon walls. But one image, partially blurred, drew his attention. A truck, parked near the ridge, facing downhill. Not part of the official response team, not registered to any of the units that reported that night. A heavy-duty pickup with a reinforced bumper. The kind used off the books. The kind that could push a cruiser off a narrow road if someone wanted it gone. Ethan zoomed in. The truck's paint was dark, maybe black, or deep green. The angle was bad. The license plate unreadable. But something else caught his eye. A small streak of oil on the ground beneath it. Thick, synthetic. The same smell Rain had reacted to in the garage. The same smell from 2 years ago. He leaned back, pulse rising. Someone had been at the scene before the explosion. Someone who left before backup arrived. Someone who used the same oil that triggered Rain's terror. Walter entered quietly, holding an old leather journal. Ethan looked up. "Dad, what's that?" Walter hesitated, then handed it to him. "Something I should have shown you years ago. I wrote about Kafji, about things I saw, things that didn't match the reports." Ethan opened the journal, flipping through pages of careful handwriting. One line stood out, circled twice in dark ink. "Not all enemies wear a foreign flag." Walter swallowed. "I wrote that after I realized some of the choices made in that desert weren't just mistakes. Some men weren't fighting for our side, even if they wore the same uniform. Sometimes the threat is standing right beside you." Ethan stared at the line again. It hit harder now. Simpler. Sharper. More true. Walter continued. "You think someone in your department caused that crash? I think someone wanted Rain and Travis gone." Walter let out a slow breath. And now that he's back, they might be coming to finish what they started. A sharp sound broke the silence. Rain stood at the back door again, posture rigid. His ears were pointed, his breath shallow. He stared into the same patch of trees as before. Ethan stepped beside him. "What do you see, boy?" Rain didn't move, didn't blink. At the bottom of the tree line, a faint glint caught the moonlight. Metal, reflective, low to the ground. Ethan's heart thudded once, hard. It was a tire rim, and beside it, barely visible, the edge of a dark truck bumper. The same shape, the same height, the same kind from the crash photo. Rain growled, low and certain. The core truth snapped into place. The truck wasn't part of the past. It had followed them home. Night in Northwood Valley carried a kind of silence that didn't just sit over the town, but seeped into it, settling into every dark corner. The temperature had dropped, frosting the porch rails and turning the ground brittle beneath the thin moonlight. Inside the coal house, the lamps were dimmed. Walter slept, in his room, and Ethan finished filing a late report at the kitchen table. Rain lay by the back door, ears half lifted, his breathing steady but alert. Lately he slept like a soldier, never fully down, never fully safe. A faint crack of wood echoed outside. Rain's head snapped up. Ethan barely noticed. He scribbled a final line in his notebook, rubbing his eyes. Rain rose slowly, muscles taut under his coat. He moved toward the window, nose twitching, body stiffening into a familiar silhouette Ethan had seen during raids, but never in his home. Another sound, softer, metal on glass. Someone testing a lock. Rain issued a low growl. Ethan lifted his head. "What is it, boy?" Rain didn't look back. The growl deepened. Ethan stood quietly, instincts rising. His hand hovered near his holster. A sudden click sounded at the back window. Then a whisper of cold air slid in as the lock gave way. A hand in a black glove pried the window open 2 inches. Then 4. Rain exploded. The shepherd launched forward with a ferocity Ethan hadn't seen since their active duty days. His bark tore through the house, a thunderous warning that rattled the cabinets. Before the intruder could slip inside, Rain slammed into the window frame, jaws clamping onto the man's sleeve, ripping fabric with a violent yank. The man cursed, scrambling. Ethan sprinted toward the noise. "Rain, stay clear!" But Rain was already outside. He burst through the dog door Walter insisted they keep open for him. In a single movement, he hit the intruder from the side, knocking him off balance and driving him into the snow. The man thrashed, kicking wildly, but Rain wasn't attacking blindly. He worked with precision honed through years of canine training. He pinned the man's arm between his teeth, but didn't puncture skin. His paws pressed the intruder's chest, heavy enough to crush breath but not ribs. It wasn't rage, it was duty. Ethan reached them seconds later, gun drawn. "Don't move." The intruder froze, gasping beneath Rain's weight. "I'm not fighting! I'm not fighting!" Ethan cuffed him quickly and pulled Rain back. The shepherd obeyed instantly, though his eyes burned with a vigilance that didn't fade. Walter rolled onto the porch in his wheelchair, pale and trembling. "What happened?" "Stay inside, Dad. We've got it handled." Ethan dragged the intruder to the kitchen, sat him in a chair, and flicked on the overhead light. The man squinted, his beanie half torn, his jacket sleeve shredded. He looked mid-30s, gaunt, with a scar running from jawline to ear. Ethan crossed his arms. "You picked the wrong house." The man swallowed hard. "I wasn't after you." "Then say what you were after." The man hesitated, eyes flicking toward Rain, who stood beside Walter with a guard dog stillness that made the intruder flinch every time the shepherd shifted. "I was looking for the dog." Walter's hand tightened on the armrest. "Why?" The man licked his lips. "Because she wants him back." Ethan stiffened. "Who?" The man sucked in a shallow breath. "You don't get it? That shepherd is worth money. A lot of it." Rain growled again. Ethan placed a steadying hand on the dog's back but didn't stop him. "Start talking. Now." The man's voice cracked under the weight of the silence. All right. My crew. We run an operation outside Tall Fir Road. We move animals. Rare ones, trained ones, police dogs especially. They command a high market if you know which buyers to call. This one, he nodded at Rain, he was our biggest win. A canine trained for takedowns, strong, smart, hard to break. Walter's voice trembled with anger. You mean you stole him? Not exactly. We created opportunities, crashes, ambushes, accidents. Ethan slammed his fist on the table. His voice roared through the kitchen. You caused that canyon explosion? The man shrank back. It was supposed to be quick. No one was meant to die. We just needed the dog out of the cruiser, so we forced the truck on the ridge. The officer didn't get out fast enough. That wasn't the plan. Walter's breath hitched. Good men die because of people like you. Ethan's eyes burned. Rain watched, every muscle quivering, recognizing words like crash and dog and forced, memories flickering behind his eyes. Ethan leaned in close. Where did you take him? Into the woods at first. We had him chained for months. But he kept fighting. Broke collars, snapped wires. Every time we thought we had him conditioned, he escaped again. Last fall, we found blood and tracks leading off. Figured he died in the cold. He turned toward Rain. Guess we were wrong. Rain let out a sharp, low bark, stepping forward just enough to make the man flinch. Ethan grabbed him by the collar. Enough, boy. He's not worth it. But the man wasn't done revealing the truth. You don't understand. My boss thought the dog was dead. But when she finds out he's still breathing, she'll come for him. Walter pushed his wheelchair closer. Who is she? The man swallowed. People call her Marla Knox. She used to run illegal breeding kennels. Then she shifted into canine trafficking. She had guys inside departments feeding her info. That canyon crash wasn't random. She wanted Rain because she knew he was the last dog trained by Sergeant Hayes before he died. Made him rare, valuable. Ethan felt the ground tilt under him. Everything he believed about the accident fractured in an instant. The grief, the guilt, the unanswered questions. Rain hadn't vanished because he got lost in the woods. He'd been stolen. Walter looked at Rain, voice barely steady. Son, she's coming for him. Rain didn't back down. He moved between Ethan and the intruder, standing tall, posture regal, like a dog who had survived fire and refused to be taken again. Ethan stared at the man. You're turning yourself in, and you're telling us everything about Marla Knox. The intruder shook his head. You don't get it. You can't protect that. Dog. No one wanted him before. Now everyone will. Ethan leaned closer, eyes cold. He's not alone this time. Rain stepped forward, pressing against Ethan's leg, gaze locked on the man with a calm, deadly certainty. And for the first time, the intruder realized what Ethan and Walter already knew. Rain wasn't just a dog. He was a survivor. And he had come home to fight. By sunrise, the man Ethan arrested was already in the custody of the Northwood County Sheriff's Office. His confession spread through the precinct like a shockwave. A canine trafficking ring, manufactured accidents, department moles, and a woman named Marla Knox pulling strings from the shadows. Ethan barely slept. Walter didn't sleep at all. Rain lay near the bedroom door the entire night, ears twitching at every shift in the house. But for once he didn't patrol anxiously. He stayed close to Walter, as if sensing the old man's mind was running faster than his body could keep up. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the station early. Deputy Arden, a stocky woman with sharp instincts and a sharper tongue, met him at the door holding a steaming travel mug. Heard you bagged one of Knox's boys last night, she said, handing him the cup. Sheriff wants a full briefing in 10. Ethan nodded, shoulders tight with adrenaline. It wasn't just a case anymore, it was personal. Inside the briefing room, Sheriff Hanley paced beside a whiteboard covered with photos and maps. When Ethan walked in, the room quieted. Hanley pointed at the image of a dark storage hut near the tree line. "This is where our guy says Knox staged the dogs she stole. We hit it at dawn." Ethan's pulse surged. "I'm going." Hanley looked him dead in the eyes. "That's exactly why you shouldn't. You're too close." Ethan held his stare. "I'm close because I'm the only one who knows what she did. And because Rain deserves better than a report and some handcuffs." After a tense moment, Hanley exhaled. "Fine, but you follow protocol. No solo hero nonsense." The raid moved fast. County deputies assembled a tactical team, and federal wildlife officers were called in for jurisdiction. By noon, 2 vans, 4 cruisers, and a mobile command truck were rolling toward the South Ridge. Ethan rode in the second cruiser, Rain sitting tall beside him. This time, he wasn't trembling. He wasn't panting or pacing. He watched everything with razor focus, ears turning toward every shift in the wind. Ethan glanced at him. "You've done this before, huh?" Rain flicked his gaze toward Ethan, then back to the window. Calm, confident, ready. Something had changed in him after stopping the intruder. He wasn't hiding from his instincts anymore. He was reclaiming them. As the convoy neared the ridge, Walter's voice chimed through Ethan's phone. "You bring him back safe, son. Both of you." "We will." The raid began with a silent sweep up the old logging trail. Snow clung to the edges of the tire ruts. Arden signaled the team. Forward, and they split into 2 flanks. Ethan and Rain moved with the second unit. When the storage hut came into view, it was exactly as described. Rusted siding, heavy padlock, tracks in the snow. But there was something else. Movement behind the hut. A figure. Arden whispered, "Contact, 11 o'clock." The team froze. The figure bolted. "Go!" Ethan shouted, sprinting. Rain didn't wait for a command. He shot forward like a bolt of lightning, weaving between trees, kicking up snow in sharp bursts. The fleeing man glanced back just in time to see a 100-pound shepherd leaping through the air. Rain collided with him and pinned him to the ground. One paw on the man's spine, jaws clamped tight on the back of his jacket. Again, he didn't puncture skin. Just held. Ethan caught up seconds later. "Good boy. Hold." The team swarmed in, cuffing the man. Inside the hut, officers found evidence confirming everything the intruder had confessed. Collars, chains, tranquilizers, false transport paperwork, and worst of all, a list of dogs scheduled for the next accident. Rain's old ID number, K914, was on it. A hush fell over the team when they realized the truth. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, stomach tightening. They targeted him. They targeted his partner. Sheriff Hanley put a hand on his shoulder. "You're not just closing a case, Cole. You're saving a hell of a lot more than 1 dog." Back in town, word traveled fast. Reporters from the local station arrived at the precinct. By evening, Rain was officially recognized for assisting in the takedown of a regional animal trafficking operation. Arden pinned a ribbon onto his collar. "For bravery," she said, scratching behind his ear. Rain stood tall, almost proud. Walter rolled forward in his wheelchair, clapping slowly. "That's my boy." The old man's eyes glistened. He reached out a hand, and Rain pressed his muzzle warmly into Walter's palm. A gesture full of unspoken things. Pride, trust, healing. Later that week, Walter asked Ethan to drive him somewhere. He wanted to visit the Northwood Veteran Center. The building was small, tucked between a feed store and a laundromat, but the moment Walter entered with Rain at his side, heads turned. An older Marine with a prosthetic leg nodded deeply. A woman from Desert Storm covered her mouth with her hands. Even Dr. Lila Grant was there, volunteering for her weekly wellness class. Walter cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'm here for the program. The therapy companion one." Rain nudged his elbow gently, as if telling him he didn't need to explain. The group leader smiled. "We'd be honored to have both of you." For the first time in years, Walter's voice didn't tremble when he introduced himself. Rain sat beside him the entire session, sometimes resting his head on a veteran's knee, sometimes leaning his full weight against someone's leg when their voice shook. He wasn't reacting out of fear. He was choosing connection. That night, Ethan stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee. Fireworks from the high school game crackled in the distance. He flinched instinctively, then looked at Rain lying nearby. The shepherd lifted his head, ears pricking toward the sound. A year ago, he would have bolted. A month ago, he would have shaken. Tonight, he simply listened and stayed still. Ethan knelt beside him. "You're not afraid anymore, huh?" Rain breathed a slow, steady breath. His chest rose and fell without tension. Walter joined them at the door. "Because he's finally home," he said softly. "This time he's not just surviving. He's protecting again. Serving again." Ethan ran a hand through the shepherd's fur. "No, this time he's doing more than serving. He's healing people." Rain glanced between father and son, studying their faces like he understood. Maybe he did. The wind rolled across the valley, carrying the fading echo of fireworks. Rain didn't move. He didn't tremble. He simply stayed. A dog who had walked through fire and come out stronger. A dog who had finally realized the truth he'd never been allowed to know. He wasn't just a survivor. He was needed. Spring arrived in Northwood Valley the way it always did, not with a sudden burst of color, but with a cautious unfolding. Snow retreated slowest in the shadows. The creek cracked open in thin silver ribbons, and the wind shifted from sharp winter bite to something gentler. The coal house, which had felt sealed tight through the long, cold months, now breathed with open windows and warm sunlight sliding across the floors. Ethan stepped out onto the backyard path carrying a bundle of wooden planks. Walter rolled behind him in his wheelchair, a toolbox balanced neatly on his lap. Rain moved between them with the deliberate patience of a dog who understood that this was not just another chore. It was something sacred. They were building a memorial. At the far corner of the yard, beneath an old cedar tree, they cleared a space. Ethan set down the wood, and Walter began handing him nails with the slow care of a man whose hands no longer worked the way they used to, but still remembered every motion from a lifetime ago. Rain lay in the soft grass, head up, eyes watching every movement. When a plank of wood fell with a thump, he didn't flinch. Not anymore. Ethan hammered the first post into the ground. "For Canine 14, he murmured, honoring the tag number Rain once carried before anyone knew his name. Walter's voice followed quietly. "And for the ones who never came home." They added names from the county records, dogs that had saved lives but had no marker, no ceremony, no carved stone. Rain rose and walked toward the cedar when they finished the frame. He sniffed the wood, nudged the corner with his nose, and then sat beside it, tall and still, as if standing guard. Walter watched him with a softened gaze. "He understands, you know?" Ethan shrugged but didn't deny it. Rain's intelligence wasn't news to him anymore. What surprised him now was the depth. The next morning, the small memorial plaque arrived. Dr. Lila Grant had helped design it. The inscription read, "In honor of the canines who served with loyalty, courage, and an unbreakable will. You are never forgotten." Ethan affixed it to the wooden frame. As he stepped back, he heard footsteps on the gravel path. Mason, the boy from next door, approached hesitantly. His limp was less pronounced since the day Rain protected him, but he still walked with a careful rhythm. He wore a small windbreaker and carried a folded drawing. "Hi, Mr. Cole," Mason said, voice shy. "My mom said I could bring this for Rain." Ethan smiled. "He's right over there, bud." Mason approached Rain slowly. No sudden movements, hands visible, just like Ethan had taught him. Rain sniffed him once, tail sweeping the ground. Then he nudged Mason's hand with approval. It was the first child Rain trusted fully. Mason unfolded the drawing. It showed a big German shepherd standing on a mountain ridge with a boy beside him. The letters were uneven, but the message was clear. "Thank you for saving me, Rain." Rain tilted his head at the paper, then gently pressed his nose against Mason's chest and stayed there. The boy laughed softly. "He likes it." Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah, he really does." Word traveled quickly through the valley. Neighbors brought flowers and tokens to the memorial. Sheriff Hanley stopped by with a framed badge from the department. Arden dropped off an American flag that had flown at the precinct on the night Rain returned home. One afternoon during the dedication, the mayor himself walked through the gate. Residents followed behind him, forming a quiet semicircle around the memorial. "This dog saved our town from a predator we didn't even know existed," the mayor said. "Northwood Valley owes him more than a ribbon." Rain stood beside Ethan, posture regal, gaze scanning the crowd with calm vigilance. Gone was the trembling, the fear, the restless pacing. He looked like a dog who had reclaimed his identity. The mayor turned to Ethan. "From now on, Rain Cole is officially recognized as the pride of Northwood Valley." A small round of applause rose. Rain didn't react to the noise, only glanced at Ethan as if to confirm everything was okay. It was. That evening, when the crowd dispersed and the yard quieted, Ethan and Walter sat together on the porch steps. Rain rested at their feet, eyes drifting between the fading sunset and the new memorial glinting softly beneath the cedar. Ethan exhaled. "I didn't think I'd ever see him like this." Walter nodded. Neither did he. That dog's been running for so long, he forgot what standing still felt like. Rain lifted his head at the sound of Walter's voice. The old man reached down, fingers brushing through Rain's fur with gentle familiarity. "You saved more than a case, Rain," he whispered. "You saved my boy. And me." Rain responded with a slow blink, a sign of trust, a sign of peace. Later that night, the valley grew quiet. The creek murmured softly. A faint breeze rustled the cedar branches above the memorial. Ethan stepped outside one last time before bed. Rain followed him, then stopped near the memorial. He looked at the plaque, then at Ethan. A low, calm breath left his chest, as if acknowledging the ones who came before him, and promising he would carry their story forward. Ethan knelt beside him. "You're not aggressive, buddy. You never were." Rain pressed his head into Ethan's shoulder. "You were just waiting," Ethan whispered, "for someone to sit beside you." Inside the house, Walter turned off the last lamp. Another quiet night settled over the valley. But this time, the quiet wasn't heavy. It was healing. The story of Rain spread through Northwood Valley faster than spring melt. What had begun as whispers around neighborhood fences grew into columns in the county paper, then full features from Portland and Seattle reporters who drove hours up the mountain roads just to meet the dog no one wanted, yet who saved an entire investigation. Walter Cole found himself sitting on the porch one morning, dressed in a clean flannel and the same boots he'd worn during his service. A young reporter adjusted her camera in front of him. "Mr. Cole, I'd like to ask about your journey with Rain. People are calling it one of the most powerful veteran stories of the year." Walter chuckled under his breath, still amazed anyone wanted to hear him talk about anything at all. He scratched his beard thoughtfully, then looked down where Rain lay by his wheelchair, head on his paws, eyes half closed but fully aware. The reporter lifted the microphone. "How did he change your life?" Walter's smile softened into something smaller, quieter. "He didn't change my life. He handed it back to me. She blinked, waiting. Walter continued, voice steady. For a long time after the Gulf, I thought the best part of me got stuck somewhere overseas. I came back breathing, sure, but I didn't come back whole. My wife carried me through the worst of it. When she passed, he paused, feeling the ache settle into his chest. The days got real quiet again. Rain lifted his head and nudged Walter's boot. The old veteran reached down, brushing his hand behind Rain's ear in a soft, practiced motion. Then this dog showed up, broken, same as I was, scared of the wrong things, and too brave about the dangerous ones. He didn't trust the world. And I didn't trust myself. But we sat beside each other long enough that we learned how to breathe again. The reporter lowered the camera for a moment. That's beautiful. It's true, Walter replied simply. Dogs don't give you lectures, they just show you who you still are. Across the yard, Lila Grant approached, carrying a folder. She waited respectfully until the interview wrapped up, then stepped closer. Walter, Ethan, I've been talking with some folks in Salem. There's a program we've been trying to expand. Canine Companion for Veterans. It matches rehabilitated working dogs with veterans dealing with PTSD, mobility issues, or isolation. She glanced at Rain, then back at them. I want Rain to be our ambassador. Ethan's eyes widened. You mean like public events and training demonstrations, visits to VA centers, offering support to vets who need a presence they can trust? Lila knelt beside Rain. He's proof that no dog is too far gone, and no person either. Rain placed his paw on her knee, as if approving the idea himself. Walter swallowed hard. You think I could help with something like that? Lila smiled. I think you already are. Over the next few weeks, invitations arrived in the mail. Veteran support groups, county fairs, community events. People wanted to hear about the dog who survived a hunting ring, a staged explosion, a year in the wilderness, and still learned to trust again. But fame wasn't what shaped the Cole household. It was the quiet changes. Ethan, for the first time in years, drove to the site of the old K9 vehicle explosion. He parked at the edge of the forest, hands tightening on the steering wheel. The memory hit him in pieces. The smoke, the screaming metal, the moment he thought Rain had died in the fire. Rain stepped out of the truck and trotted to Ethan's side. He nudged Ethan's hand gently, grounding him in the present. I should have looked harder for you, buddy, Ethan whispered. Rain pressed closer, leaning his weight against Ethan's leg. Forgiveness didn't need words, it only needed presence. Ethan breathed out slowly. For the first time, he let the truth settle inside him without fighting it. He hadn't failed Rain. Someone else had caused that fire. Someone else had hunted him. Ethan's job wasn't to drown in guilt. It was to stand up now. He knelt beside Rain. We made it back. That's what matters. Rain licked his hand once, sealing the moment. Back in town, the community center held a small ceremony to honor the newly expanded Veteran K9 program. Lila spoke first, then Walter. When Ethan stepped up to the microphone, he glanced at the crowd but spoke to Rain. This town calls him aggressive, troubled, dangerous. But the truth is, Rain didn't break. He was pushed past his limit and still found a way to stand. He's not a warning. He's a testament. A quiet hush settled over the room. He taught me that second chances aren't given. They're fought for. Rain trotted forward and sat at Ethan's feet, looking up at him with calm, intelligent eyes. The crowd erupted in applause. From that day on, Rain wasn't just a dog in Northwood Valley. He was a symbol of second chances, a symbol of survival, a symbol of what could happen when someone finally chose to sit beside the one everyone else feared. Walter's interviews went viral. Lila's program gained statewide funding. Ethan's old wounds began to close. And Rain, once, forgotten in a cage with a warning tag, now walked through town with children waving at him, veterans saluting him, and even strangers smiling when they saw his steady gait. It wasn't fame, it was legacy. A legacy built not from heroics, but from the simple, stubborn act of refusing to give up, even on the darkest day, even when no one wanted him. Rain didn't just belong to the Coles anymore. He belonged to everyone who needed proof that broken things could rise again. The morning of the grand opening broke with a thin veil of fog clinging to the pines above Northwood Valley. As the sun lifted, the fog pulled away like a curtain, revealing the brand new Northwood Hope Center, a place built for veterans, for healing, and for the dogs that saved them in more ways than one. People filled the courtyard in a slow, steady wave. Veterans in faded jackets, families with small children clutching hand-drawn signs, local officers in uniform. And front and center, beneath a banner still rustling in the mountain breeze, stood Ethan and Walter Cole with Rain positioned between them like a silent sentinel. Rain looked different now, still powerful, still carrying the weight of everything he'd survived, but calm, grounded, at home. As the mayor finished his speech about resilience and service, a cluster of reporters stepped forward, one of them raising a hand toward Ethan. "Officer Cole, can we ask a question?" Ethan nodded. "Why did you keep Rain with you through everything, even when people thought he was beyond saving?" Ethan looked down at the German shepherd sitting at his side. Rain's ears flicked at the reporter's voice, but his eyes stayed locked on Ethan, silently waiting. Ethan rested his hand on Rain's head. "He didn't just survive what broke him," Ethan said softly. "He helped me survive what broke me. And somehow, he saved us both." A hush fell over the courtyard. Cameras clicked, and even the wind seemed to pause. Ethan lifted his gaze to the lens directly in front of him. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" The words hung in the cold morning air like a call across the valley, a challenge, a reminder, an invitation. Rain stood then, muscles shifting beneath his coat, and stepped forward toward the edge of the stage. His eyes swept the tree line beyond the crowd, scanning with that instinct that had never left him. The wind teased through his fur. It wasn't a stance of fear this time. It was purpose. As if he knew the journey was bigger than him, bigger than them, bigger than Northwood Valley. Walter rolled forward beside Ethan, whispering, "He's looking for the next soul he'll save." "Maybe," Ethan replied. "Or maybe he's just making sure no one else stands alone the way he once did." The ceremony continued, but the moment with Rain had already become the center of the day. Children came up to give him small treats and drawings. Veterans placed their hands gently on his shoulders. Lila announced that the Hope Center's first official therapy team would be Walter and Rain, working together to support veterans across the state. Rain accepted each friendly touch without fear, without hesitation, without flinching at sudden noises or crowds. Even when a truck backfired near the lot, Rain didn't collapse into panic. He merely looked back at Ethan, confirming he was safe. Later, as the crowd thinned and the sun dipped behind the ridge, Ethan stepped out behind the center for a breath of quiet. Rain followed, padding through the fallen pine needles with a steady gait. They stopped at the hill overlooking the valley. Lights flickered on in the small town below. Smoke rose from chimneys. The mountains framed everything in wide, unbroken silence. Ethan crouched next to him. "You know, I'm not sure who found who, buddy." Rain nudged Ethan's chest with his nose. "I guess that's how it works," Ethan whispered. "The broken find the broken, and together they figure out how to stand again." A soft rustle in the underbrush made Rain turn his head sharply. His posture stiffened. Alert. Ethan glanced in the same direction. A deer stepped out, looked at them, then bounded away. Rain relaxed, tail dropping back to its calm sway. Ethan laughed. Still watching over this valley, huh? Rain didn't look away from the trees. His breath fogged gently in the cold air. The weight in his posture wasn't fear. It was readiness, as if some part of him still believed his story wasn't finished, as if he knew there were more people out there who needed a dog like him, someone forgotten, someone misjudged, someone waiting for a second chance. Ethan stood and rested a hand on his back. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Below them, the Hope Center sign flickered bright, glowing against the dusk. A place built from survival, loyalty, and the simple truth that healing never happens alone. Rain looked once more toward the darkening forest, then back at Ethan, eyes steady, unbroken. The journey wasn't over, and somewhere in the valley the wind carried that truth forward. For anyone watching, for anyone hurting, for anyone still searching for a loyal companion who could change everything. As the screen fades, Ethan's voice echoes one last time. What's your story with a loyal pet? If you believe in stories of courage, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between humans and German shepherds, support our channel. Your voice keeps these stories alive,